recording?
Still waiting on the queue.
Good to go.
Okay, we're good to go.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 4th, Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. Welcome to the very merry month of May, our first meeting of this new month. This is Chair Catherine Harrington, and with me this morning are Commissioners Pam Treese, Commissioner Roy Rogers, Commissioner Jerry Willey, and Commissioner Nafisa Fye. So the first item on the agenda is board and leadership communication. Which commissioner would like to go first?
Morning, Chair. I can go first. Good morning, commissioners. Good to see everyone. Happy Tuesday. Last week I had a really great time speaking to the Mike program kids. These are students that go to alternative high school, and it was really exciting to introduce them to Washington County and what we do and how they can get involved. I also had a great meeting with connecting with our library, Aloha Library board members and staff, and that was really good discussion. And my kids grew up in the Aloha Library, so that was really nice for them to actually see not only a user of the library, but also their county commissioner. I also had a great conversation around economic development with the new executive director for Latino Network, and exciting works ahead for Washington County and partnering. That's all the updates I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Fye. Commissioner Rogers, anything?
Sure, a couple of things. One, we have a executive committee tomorrow at Work Systems. That's always interesting. It seemed like I've had a whole rash of things to deal with them lately. They've got a lot of reauthorization information that they need, and I've got to sign as the elected official on their board. I've got to sign for all of that. Thursday is a meeting with DeFazio. I always enjoy seeing him. He gets a little animated at times, so it's always interesting to see that. Had a couple of three interesting conversations with constituents. They're a little concerned about potentially what's going to happen today with the governor, as you might guess. Monday night, for any of you who are interested, I think at least three of you probably know this, is Frank's having his state of the city down in Tualatin, and I know he'll do a bang up job, though it's hard to, I keep telling Jason, it's hard to top what he did in Tigard. He really went all out. So anyway, that's what's coming up in the real near future.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. Commissioner Willey or Treese, anything?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Had the Hillsborough Chamber Board of Directors meeting last week. It's always interesting to their Metro President Lynn Peterson made a presentation, updated the board on what the goings on at Metro, and we as a commission have already seen that. So that was good to hear that again. Matt, Clean Water Services, as you know, has been instrumental in providing PPE for the last year specifically to a number of organizations, but specifically our business recovery centers. And so they are winding that program down. So I met with Mark Jockers and others at Clean Water Services to just talk through that a little bit, and then make the BRCs all aware of the winding down of that PPE source. And so that went really well. It was good. It was just good to hear kind of an update. Clean Water Services has done a great job on providing the PPE for those folks. And so, and much more than BRCs. I was amazed. So anyway, shout out to CWS there. Good job, you guys. Had a meeting with Latricia. It's always good to meet with Latricia. She's got a lot of things on her plate. So just to catch up with all of the ideas that she has and just kind of, I guess, have discussions about what's on her mind. And she's just doing a great job too. So I really appreciate the time that she gives to us. Had a CAT briefing with Commissioner Treese, and just to get an update on that Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment. I have trouble remembering all of that. But yes, it was good. That's what a great project that is. It's going to take us a while to pull that one off, but it was good to get updated. And then, of course, all the constituent meetings that we have, some about mental health. And so one of the ladies that I talked to had a tremendous personal life experience with dealing with mental health in her family. And so I'm trying to get her plugged into one of our boards or committees just so she can use her experience that she's had for the last several years in dealing with mental health issues. So yeah, and we continue to get lots of constituent requests for information and of course to hear their side on things. And so it's just another week.
Commissioner Treese?
Morning. My report is a little bit lengthy and it's kind of formal, but I wanted to make sure I got to all the points. So I'm going to go ahead and start. On Wednesday last week, I attended the MPAC meeting, and the first discussion was around the Regional Mobility Policy Update. This policy sets the standards that defines congestion and transportation system needs at the planning level and guides development review and decision. It's currently based on volume 2 capacity at intersections and roadway segments. ODOT and Metro are working to update the policy. Sorry, my dog is joining in. He was at the meeting as well. They're working to update the mobility policy and the regional transportation plan and the Oregon Highway Plan to one that is focused more on multimodal and considering many more factors. So it's in the beginning stages, but it's an important piece. We also had an update on the 2019 Metro Natural Areas Bond Measure. It was the first update for MPAC since the measure passed. Metro has produced a guidebook for the use of local share funds and established a Natural Areas and Capital Performance Oversight Committee, in addition to refinement planning for how to allocate the funds. Within our county, our facilities department is participating on the
And I think we've lost her.
subcommittee of CCI. Can you hear me?
Whoa, wait a second. I think you're going to have to take us all the way back to the Parks Bond and our facilities staff. They haven't come to us in recent time to ask us for policy direction. So I think we need to weigh in on that.
Comfortable with that?
So your internet
I just
cut
stopped.
out.
I just
So,
stopped my video. To
so
see.
your update ended when you were discussing the Metro Parks and Nature Bond and our facility staff.
I'll go back to that piece, and I turned my video off to get better reception. So basically, I just wanted to let you know that within our county, our facilities department is participating on the committee that's providing input on the guidelines for the use of the local share funds from the 2019 Metro Natural Areas Bond Measure. Then on Thursday, I met with a subcommittee of CCI. It was the SNR subcommittee, and that was Fran Warren, Susan Mates, and Joanne Delmonico. They were interested in talking about sustainability. They wanted to talk about how to collaborate to capitalize on missed opportunities when it comes to integrating more climate considerations into the development decisions in the county. I'm going to be meeting with Stephen Roberts, Teresa Cherniak, and Robin Strawn to follow up on the notes from that and then reconvene that meeting. On Thursday night, we had the Thompson Road Community Meeting, and that was hosted in connection with LUT. It was basically the group of concerned community members regarding the curve in Thompson Road that's in my district. It was a good discussion, and I think that they understand that what the pros and cons are of straightening that piece of roadway, and it kept the lines of communication open, even though the answers weren't necessarily what the community members were hoping for. The questions came from a member of the community to LUT, and LUT did a great job of answering those questions. Then on Friday, as I mentioned last week, I had missed the presentation at Community Action on the point in time app demonstration. And this is the app that looks at homelessness in the county. I forwarded the PowerPoint presentation to all of you to take a look at it. You can see where the homeless were interviewed through the app in your respective districts. It's really a powerful tool, and it just underscored for me how much Community Action works together with the county. And I had a discussion with the chair yesterday, and it's they're funded federally, and they're throughout the whole state. There's community action organizations, but I'm really pleased with the way that our group works here locally with the county. But it's it's a new process. It's an app, and it can act as a tracking mechanism as well. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that PowerPoint. I did receive the general fund enforcement briefing from the sheriff's office, like the rest of you. It was a great report, and I'm continually impressed with the work of the sheriff's office, and continually reminded about what our budget needs and budget availability and needs and wants are. The last two more things, I did attend the CAT briefing with Commissioner Willie, as he mentioned. It's the treatment and triage center is impressive. It's a substantial price tag at $75 million, and I am hoping that through the opioid settlement that we'll get opportunities for funding, but even so, it won't match the funding needs. I continue to talk by email with Joy Culver. She's the woman that testified about the skunks and raccoons issues that she and her neighbors are having. LUT has been great in their response to another issue that she has about the Somerset West sign. And Marnie and Randy have been very helpful about the pest issue. Joyce communicated with me by email on 20 different occasions over the last week, and has asked for the emails of every board member. So I just want you to know that I am communicating with her directly with Randy and Marnie. So if you have any questions, you can filter them through me or Randy and Marnie. Thank you. Sorry for the long report.
Could you summarize again what are the key issues from her? From Joy? Commissioner Treese, are you there?
I think you're on mute, Pam, as well as not on camera.
Sorry, I'm Chair. She was the one who testified at the board meeting last week about the skunks and raccoon issues, and I have been working with Megan, with Marnie and Randy to come up with alternatives for her for control of the pest issues. Did you hear me?
Yep. I'm just a little puzzled, so I'll have Elizabeth follow up. So, okay, thank you.
right?
Okay, so I'll go next. I sent you all the information from the WEA Board of Directors meeting with regard to their strategic plan completion in visiting that. Like you, I had various constituent meetings last week, including with regard to Project Turnkey in Hillsborough. There was also some follow-up from the AOC Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association letter. And then mostly it's budget time, diving into the Clean Water Services budget as well as the Washington County budget. Following up on the CFTLC, the Council of Forest Trust Lands meeting that Commissioner Willie and I attended on Monday, April 19th. We've had some follow-up on that, including I spoke with the CFTL folks at AOC. They staff CFTL as well as with our legal counsel, and that alternate HCP, CFTLC has submitted a proposal to the state and state forestry board to consider an alternative to the state's habitat conservation plan. As you may recall, Commissioner Willie and I abstained from the vote at CFTL on that because we have not had the opportunity to review that as a board. So I've got a request in to figure out how we can get that scheduled before the board in the coming weeks. Then we've received various communiques, some embargoed with regard to COVID. I followed up with Leah Perkins Hagley yesterday on, and after talking with Commissioner Willie about what's going on with the 4-H and FFA support through the Washington County Fair, and learned from that the complication isn't at the state level, rather it is at the OSU level with restrictions on the 4-H program that is one size fits all with OSU, in college restrictions. And we all know that the fair operations is very different than in classroom college classes, labs, and auditoriums. So I spoke with Gina Nickel yesterday, and AOC is going to coordinate with the Oregon Fair Association and look at drafting a letter for all commissioners across all 36 counties to request some modifications to the guidance so that 4-H and FFA kids can have a more rich program this summer than not at all. So stay tuned. That's all information. But once we have that draft, just like with the Orla letter, that'll come quick. So I'll be sure to give you a heads up on that, just as I did with the Orla letter. So that's about it. I'm looking forward to our budget meetings, particularly CWS this Friday, and then starting on May 13th with the Washington County budget. So that's it from me. How about leadership communications? Ms. Angie, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. It was good to have a day and a weekend off to spend with my family, who I haven't seen my mother for 1.5 years. So good times. So I do have a few operational updates. First, some of you have been contacted by City of Tigard, and you've seen constituent emails regarding the Colonies complex. I do want to provide you an update, as this does connect to our asset management strategy with housing. So there's two issues relative to the Colonies property. First is maintenance. There's mold issues, as well as concern that has been raised by the tenants regarding the name of the property called Colonies. So first step, the short-term mitigation of the name. All the signs of the name have been painted over by the end of yesterday, business day. This was also a request that we received from the City of Tigard in addition to the tenant. So I do want to stress that point. We do have one of the tenant units that does have mold issues. So our team is working with the property management team to mitigate those mold issues. We're working on scheduling a community meeting tentatively for May 20th. We're 90% there to getting those logistics pulled together. There will be a one-pager notification sent out to the tenants, and this will allow us the opportunity to talk about short-term maintenance as well as long-term maintenance on the property. Then relative to the longer-term naming of the building, during the tenant meeting on May 20th, we'll also talk to the residents about the process for renaming the site and involve them and the community in that renaming process. The City of Tigard has been updated on this progress, and will continue to remain in contact with them. I do want to indicate that these types of issues are taken very seriously by the team, and that is the reason Comey and his team are really focused on strategic asset management. As we look to increase our affordable housing portfolio, we also need to ensure that we're maintaining our existing assets. So this is a really important focus for us to have, and to bring our properties up to current standards, which is a long-term capital maintenance strategy. I also wanted to provide you an update on Project Turnkey. Dropped in your email box after this leadership update will be a frequently asked question handout. We continue to compile questions and answers to questions as our team engages with the community and with business owners. Overall, what is occurring is support for a shelter, support for services of homelessness, and a concern from businesses relative to behaviors that may occur on site. Staff are taking all of this information in, and that will be part of our operation management plan as we move forward. The FAQs, I feel, will be helpful to you if you do receive questions from community. I do want to note an important date that is listed in the FAQ, and that is a Project Turnkey virtual community meeting, which will be held on May 19th from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And the Zoom link for your information is in the FAQ. And Chair, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Were you able to get confirmation? Well, let me back up. So as you know, I had a meeting with a Hillsborough City Councilor and a restaurant owner, and I shared information that has been shared with us, the full Board of Commissioners, and that included the assurance that the Hillsborough City Council has been briefed along the way with regard to Project Turnkey and this project, specifically the Econo Lodge purchase. And the city councilor took offense at that. So I was wondering, have you gotten confirmation that in fact the city of Hillsborough has been a partner, as you and our staff has said, and briefed their city council along the way? Or is there new status on that?
That is my understanding, and I will get further detail as far as when that's occurred and in which manner, and forward that to the board. I should note that it's not just the elected. Our staff have been working hand in hand from their community development staff, as well as communication staff, and the city manager's office as well. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so relative to COVID, we do have a briefing later today. From a workforce standpoint, we do have 4 positive cases and 1 quarantine due to close contact. We are in high risk operations, and as board members are aware of Washington County moving into extreme risk. Chair Harrington?
That was embargoed information.
Okay, I sincerely apologize for that. We continue to make plans if that should occur, so that we can transition appropriately in a safe manner.
I think one thing that may help in the update during the business meeting is if our team can include some graphs of what the caseload has involved and some information about the age segments. I know we've received information about the presence of the virus from 18 to 40-year-olds, but I'm not sure how the community has gotten that information. So I've received several questions from various folks, a little puzzled because in the OHA emails, they see that the number of reported deaths is way, way down. And so they're asking questions about the presence of this virus and what's happening. But clearly our state is struggling with the ICU beds with this virus, but nonetheless, everyone's pushing hard, lots of messages going out to different age groups, targeted marketing to get vaccinated so that we can get Oregon reopen, by the end of June. So boy, I look forward to that. I hope it happens. So I look forward to that update during our business meeting. Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any other questions on COVID that would advance notice to our staff as part of that presentation? No? Okay, great.
Marty Kyle will have graphs in her presentation to hopefully answer those questions for you, Chair. The board will be receiving weekly updates relative to vaccination status. I am also forwarding those updates to city managers so they can forward them to their council members. The cities are working on amplifying also the county social media posts to help further get this information out to the community. I have received from 3 different city managers appreciation for that effort, and they rapidly shared it with their council members. And that concludes my weekly report.
Alan, what have you got for us?
Commissioners, thank you. I've been out of town for a few days, so I'm mainly just catching up on my emails. And so I'm here for through Wednesday. And I had good news that my middle son, 26 years old, was able to get a vaccination appointment tomorrow. So hopefully we'll get more of those young people vaccinated. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and boy, it sounds promising that the FDA is considering the emergency use of the vaccination to people 12 years and up. So we'll look forward to those developments moving forward as well. While you were away, I forwarded an email with regard to the questions from constituents on assessment and taxation to Brad to try to make sure that for the meeting at 10 o'clock that we had the benefit of legal advice in dealing with challenges to assessment and taxation. So in terms of catching up before our 10 o'clock, if you could look at that, that would
Okay.
be helpful.
I have seen that from Mr. Kloss, and I will talk to Brad.
Terrific. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Bye.
I don't have any further information other than trying to make sure the board was going to have the benefit of good counsel during our meeting. That's all. Well, Diane, it looks like the fire alarm at Clean Water Services is all set. So the building hasn't burned down. I don't see any smoke. So was that just a monthly test or what?
No, we had an alarm that went off in the acid wash area related to the laboratory operations. And they do want to do a shout out to Hillsborough Fire. They were amazing. They were out here. They did the fire inspection. They were able to locate where it was, and they're working with our team. And also thank you to Tanya's team. You probably saw Mark and I had to seamlessly move to our cars or to work outside to be able to participate today. But so we had our excitement for this morning, but we're well in hand with the partners we have in the region. So thank you, everyone. The team is preparing for the budget on Friday. It's a full virtual mode. So I'm hoping we don't have fire alarms in the building, because there will be many folks here in their offices doing the budget presentation, but they're looking forward to it, to seeing all of you. The other thing that's going on with COVID, we're at full operations. All of our team members have now cleared. They've returned back to work. So that's really good news for Clean Water Services. And they're all fully committed to this next phase as we may be going to. There is a privy update from Mark Jockers about the sewer surveillance work that we're doing. And there's some good news in the data. Ken Williamson and the team are seeing a flattening of the concentrations in the raw sewage, which is all very good news for us. So we'll continue to monitor it, but we can see the human trend is increasing still. But they did a nice job showing you the data from the beginning to where we are today. So we'll continue to do this privy for all of you. And the city managers at the cities were very interested in this also. So we'll provide the information to them. But thank you.
Thank you. It's helpful to know a little bit more about what the community is facing with regard to this virus. And I'm reminded here being the month of May that the farm workers' presence throughout Washington County increases. So making sure there's good hygiene and that vaccinations are available to that community is good. So that's great. Well, does anyone have any other questions or comments before we move on with the agenda? All righty then, we'll move on to the complete streets design update. And whoops, Commissioner Treese.
I'm sorry, did you ask if anybody had questions about the board agenda today?
Nope, I didn't.
Okay.
Thank you.
I wanted, I just want to mention that in the multi-year contracts piece in the consent agenda, there are quite a few listed that are also members of WEA, and I just wanted to bring that up. I can list them if you would like, or I can just note that in this manner.
Whatever you need to do to make sure that it's clear you don't have a conflict of interest.
I'd like to go ahead and list them, please. They are AKS, 3J, Kittleson, WH Pacific, WSP, David Evans and Associates, Fair and Peters, Dowell, HDR, Jacobs, KFF, KPFF, Murray Smith, OTAC, and DKS. So thank you for the time on that.
You betcha. Anything else on today's agenda?
The only thing I have is in regard to the Salary Commission report. I'll be voting in favor of it, but I have a couple of comments impacting me only.
All righty. Anything else, folks? Nope. Okay, then we'll move on to the work session topics. The next one, complete streets design update. Mr. Roberts, you and your team, take it away.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm actually going to turn things over to Aaron Wardell, who's our Principal Transportation Planner, and Stacy Shetler, who's our County Engineer, to do the presentation. We've previously briefed your board on this topic a couple of times back in August of 2019, and then more recently here in January of this year. And the purpose of this project really is updating our road standards to try to reflect more multimodal transportation goals. And a couple of the key things that we want to share today are some feedback that we've received through an online open house and through some other engagement that we've been doing, and try to get a sense of some direction from the board if you have any, and then answer any questions, obviously, that you have. So with that, Aaron, I think, are you going to take us through this?
I am.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Erin Wardell, Principal Transportation Planner, and I'm here to share the Complete Streets Design Update along with Stacy Shetler, our County Engineer. Next slide, please. So to remind you of the objectives of this project, as Stephen said, we were most recently here in January. So the purpose of this project is to develop design standards that implement our transportation system plan policies and reflect how Washington County has changed our evolving expectations for what our roadways should be, evolving community expectations, wanting to reflect more multimodal throughput and have flexibility in design speeds and lane widths. The primary focus of this work is on arterials and collectors within the urban area, although we've looked a little bit more broadly as well. Next slide, please. So we're going to revisit these questions at the end, but for you to keep these in mind as we're presenting. Are you comfortable with the proposed updates to the cross sections? Do you agree with the selected bicycle and pedestrian facility options? And do you agree with the area type definitions and the respective design elements? Next slide. This slide is showing a timeline of our project. It's been about a 1.5 year effort. So we started this in September of 2019. We're expecting that later this summer, we'll be bringing forward the updated document for your board action. That may get pushed a little bit from June, where it's shown in this graphic, just given board meeting schedules and our need to develop the full document before we can bring it forward, but we expect to have that sometime later this year. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the guiding documents and processes for how we build our transportation system. So this slide is showing some information about the transportation system plan compared to the road design and construction standards. Both of these documents guide different elements of what we want our transportation system to look like. So the transportation system plan is an element of our comprehensive plan. It's our 20-year vision of our transportation system. And the elements that are within the transportation system plan that relate to the system and what it looks like are the overall policy goals, the right-of-way widths, meaning how much space we need to build, say a 5-lane arterial or a 3-lane collector. This has to do with how much right-of-way our capital projects team has to acquire when they're building a project, or how much width a developer has to dedicate as a part of a large development project. The transportation system plan also guides the number of lanes on a facility, the functional classification. So is it an arterial? Is it a collector? Is it a neighborhood route? And then we have overlays such as enhanced major street bikeways. So these are special types of roadways that the board at some point has decided needs some special design treatments. So those are all the elements that are in the transportation system plan. As a part of this project right now, we're not proposing any updates to the transportation system plan elements. But over on the road design and construction standards side, this is our technical engineering design and construction requirements document. It guides all public road and bridge improvements in Washington County or under Washington County's jurisdiction. The road design and construction standards contains the cross sections of roadway types, the roadway element widths, that means lane widths, bicycle lane widths, planter strip widths, the design and target speeds for the facilities, and then curb design elements. So that's things like, is the curb mountable? How high does a curb need to be? Does it contain a truck apron? Different elements like that. So this project is proposing updates to the road design and construction standards and specifically to those bullet points. So that's why we've outlined that in blue. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes a little bit more about that process of how we get to achieving the transportation system we want to see. So when we ask the question, what system do we need? The transportation system plan answers that question. If the question is who builds it, as far as where funding comes from, projects are built either by capital projects, meaning these are publicly funded projects delivered by Land Use and Transportation. These are funded by the Major Streets Improvement Program or the Urban Roads Maintenance District or other funding sources. Or it's built by private development, and this is privately funded projects that are required as a condition of development. So now we know what the system should look like. We know who is going to build it and how it's going to be paid for. So how is it built? What does it look like? That comes from the road design and construction standards. Next slide. So jumping into a little bit about our proposed update, and then I'm going to hand it over to Stacy to go through some of the specific details of the cross sections and design elements. So for our proposed update, we proposed including area types for the different functional classifications to reflect these different typologies that we have around Washington County. And we started with 3 different area types to take out to the public and ask questions about. And that was a town center area type. Bethany Town Center is the top picture on this slide. Other urban, this means within the urban growth boundary, but not a town center. And then the rural area type. And within those area types, various design details would vary. So possibly different options for bicycle facilities, for sidewalk widths, design speed / target speed, meaning speeds would be a little bit slower, say in the town center area as opposed to a rural area, whether or not on-street parking is an option, and then the lane widths. Next slide, please. And we also took out to the public about 8 different options for how we would protect bicyclists. So this slide is showing 4 different options. These were the 4 that emerged through the process as being the most possible or the most feasible. And so this is showing our standard on-street buffered bike lane in the top left, an option for providing more visual protection through using plastic tough curbs and flexi posts for that on-street buffered bike lane. The options on the bottom show a bike lane that's separated from the roadway by a planter strip and implemented right next to the sidewalk. And then the bottom right option is what's called a cycle track right next to a lane of traffic with a mountable curb. So we took these as well as the other 4 options out to the public and asked people to react to them and let us know how they feel about these various bicycle protection facilities. Next slide. This slide summarizes the various pieces of community outreach we've done throughout this project. So those first 2 bullet points have been done or were done earlier in the project. We started out with a project website to share information. 18 months ago, or a little bit more than that actually, we did 12 targeted stakeholder interviews to help us inform the scope of work. And then in the month of February, right after our last board meeting, we held an online open house that was promoted through our county resources and social media. We also passed it to our partner agencies and community groups to promote as well. So we ended up with 99 survey responses from the general public on that. And then Stacy and I have done a bit of a roadshow, and we've done 19 different presentations to community groups, committees, and elected official groups. Next slide. So this slide summarizes generally what we heard. And this first bullet point is pretty important because we went into this thinking that the area types were really going to show some differences in the design. And one of the first things we heard when we met with our Safe Routes to School coordinators around the county was, well, shouldn't the town center type, which has lower design speeds and wider sidewalks, include schools? And we thought, well, that's actually really good feedback because schools have a lot of multimodal traffic. And so maybe it's not so much town center we're thinking of areas that have a lot of multimodal transportation happening and could maybe use a little bit more of the protection. And so what you'll see in the next slides that Stacy goes over is that we've changed the town center area type into a multimodal area type to reflect those multimodal traffic areas. As far as the bicycle facility preferences went, our camps were really split on this. We have a number of very confident cyclists in Washington County who they want to be protected, but they want maximum accessibility. And so they are comfortable being on the street. They're comfortable taking a lane. They don't want to have to cross intersections as a pedestrian, for example, and they want to go fast because they're using their bicycle as a vehicle, as opposed to families and less confident cyclists who really want to be fully separated from traffic and be fully protected. And so we feel like we're walking a bit of a narrow line here and trying to serve all of the needs of the public, and you'll see some of the options that we came up with in the next slides. There are concerns about maintenance and debris with some of these bicycle facility options. Basically, if the bicycle lane is separated from traffic, it's hard for us to sweep it. It's just not something we've traditionally done. And so we've talked to City of Hillsborough a number of times because they're already building cycle tracks, and talked to them about how they are navigating maintenance. They haven't quite figured that out yet either. We've talked to some other jurisdictions who are building these about how they're maintaining them. It's an ongoing conversation and something that we'll need to talk about. But when we build these facilities, of course, we need to take care of them for their life cycle. So that's something we'll be continuing to work on. The next two questions are, what happens at intersections? So the cross sections look great. What happens at the intersections where all the conflicts are? For the next phase of this project, with your marching orders today, hopefully we'll be directing our consultant to prepare some protected intersection designs that would show how you transition from the proposed design treatments through an intersection to provide protection for bicyclists and pedestrians. And then we'll be looking at pedestrian crossings as well in that next phase of developing design drawings. And then the last bullet point, how does county staff coordinate with city staff? And this is really important because we have a number of county facilities that are within cities. So cities are doing the land use permitting, cities have land use authority, but it's a county road. And so we've talked with our city partners and their elected officials about how we coordinate and how we hope to continue to coordinate with them, wanting to be respectful of the fact that they have land use authority. And so they'll be making some of those decisions about what these roads look like. So next slide. And with this, I'm going to hand it over to Stacy to go through what these proposed designs actually look like.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Erin. I'm Stacy Shetler, the county engineer. And so Erin did a great job of summarizing where we've been and where we're going with this project. And so taking what we heard from the outreach as well as the consultant work that had been developed along the way, some preliminary cross sections were developed both for context type, which is shown at the lower left in the table, the urban, the multimodal area, and the rural areas, and also for the facility type. And so the slide that you're seeing is an arterial. The left part of that arterial is the rural or urban interim cross section. The right side being the urban cross section, where we'll focus most of our time on today. And in this, in general, what you're seeing as part of the complete streets is we're designed for lower target speeds. And as we're going to start to achieve those lower target speeds on our facilities, we can start narrowing the travel lanes. So our existing travel lanes are 12 feet wide. We're looking at an 11-foot wide standard, base standard. And then with that extra space that we're able to reclaim from the travel lanes, the drive lane and the center turn lane, we're able to reallocate that to our bike lane and our sidewalks. And so the general trend is that lowering target speeds, narrower travel lanes, and more space for bikes and pedestrians. Next slide, please. Those same trends continue through the arterial section, where the design speeds are even lower. The lane widths get a little lower in some cases as well, and then starting to develop some parking options that would fit within this context. Next slide, please. So within the preliminary standard cross section, which is shown on the left there with the bike facility and the ped facility, some optional variations were developed. So option 2 being a raised cycle track, which puts the bike lane between the drive lane and planter strip but elevated. Option 4 being the cycle track next to the sidewalk. And then option 5 being a variation on option 4, where it's a combined multi-use path. Most of these variations and options fit within that same space. So it's just a reallocation of features within the space. Option 3 is a little bit wider, but as Erin had noted earlier, there's some areas like in transit-oriented districts where we're able to get a little bit more right-of-way and have some more space to play with. Next slide, please. Within our developing the parking options, not too many variations here. This shows the plant with and without a planter strip, but then we're also working on a design detail that would flip the parking lane and the bike lane so that the cyclist would be riding between parked vehicles and the curb instead of between a parked vehicle and the drive lane. Next slide. So as Aaron mentioned, probably the most challenging part is the intersections themselves. So the linear cross sections tend to be fairly straightforward. We want to be purposeful in how we move that cross section through the intersection, being consistent with those bike and ped facilities, so we're not changing their experience too much. Some of the elements that go into the intersection design details stem from the complete streets concepts of changing the design vehicle. So currently our design vehicle is the largest type of vehicle that we would expect to see on the facility. So it tends to be freight. Whereas with a complete streets process, we would then start designing for the more prevalent vehicle, which is the passenger car and the SUV, but then accommodating the larger vehicles that need more space. And so one of the areas that this plays out in, and is demonstrated on the right-hand side of the slide, is a turn radius. And so turn radius, as we start to narrow the turn radius to design for passenger car and SUVs, that turn radius starts to get smaller. And as a result, we're able to start controlling speeds better, lower speeds around curves, have safety benefits for both the pedestrian and cyclists, and also raises the level of comfort. What's shown in the kind of the blue areas are the amenable truck aprons, and so that's how we would then accommodate our larger vehicles. That amenable truck apron is a space where a trailer would be able to overtrack, not interfere with a pedestrian space, but then also be able to navigate the turn. So next slide, please. So our next steps as we begin finalizing the cross sections and the intersection design details, we'll start putting together the design drawings, start updating the language in the road standards. And as we start identifying those changes, we'll also need to be mindful of what other processes and other documents that need to be updated as well, like the transportation system plan and the community development code. I think that leads us back to our questions that we had asked at the beginning, and I'll turn it back over to the chair and the board to give us your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Double mute.
Commissioners, do you have any questions on any of the material that staff has taken us through? I know I'd have one, but Commissioner Willie, go ahead.
Yeah, just there was a comment made earlier in the presentation here about coordinating with the cities that actually own the, I guess, the design rights, especially for, even though it's a county road going through their city. So are there ideas about how it should be designed different than the proposals that we saw here?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes a city may prefer, like say a wider planter strip option, or Hillsborough already has cycle tracks adopted into their standard and the county doesn't. And so if we're working with Hillsborough specifically, they may want to see that. And we've worked with them, to implement that in cases where they want to see that. Oftentimes city design standards just look different from the counties. And so it's sort of an ongoing iterative conversation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we have tried to be pretty cooperative and coordinating with the cities and trying to help accommodate preferences where there are differences between design standards or preferences for some reason in a lot of cases. And I think, well, I could name a number of examples, but anyway, I think it works well. And I think that we're obviously open to continuing to commit to be flexible and work with our partners as we're developing our project designs.
So on the projects that, and again, you referred to them back up several slides ago, I'm kind of scrolling back up there, the difference between slides where we are actually paying for the project versus the private sector because they're developing something, and so we have those requirements in there. How does the, I guess, private sector be able to weigh in and say this is too expensive, or we'd like it done some other way, or do they just have to say whatever you want and we'll pay for it?
Well, I think that when it comes to the higher levels of bicycle protection, those are likely to be built through capital projects. It doesn't make sense to build 200 feet of cycle track, right, when a development comes in and is required to do frontage improvements. But what we want to make sure is that the developer is dedicating the correct amount of right-of-way as they're required to do, and that they're not building something that is a tear-out project or that precludes us going through with a later capital project. And so generally, if we have a development come in and it's a large enough development, or it's fronting on a collector or an arterial, so it has to build some of these things, they would probably build up a standard sidewalk and the on-street bike lane. It would be unusual for a development to be large enough that it would be required to build something bigger than that. So most of these higher levels of protection would come through our capital projects team.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rogers,
I have
you had a
one.
question?
Yeah, please. I have one follow-up. It was sort of along what Commissioner Willie was getting at. What, Stephen, and this is to you, what are we talking to the cities in terms of jurisdictional transfer, not ownership, because they don't want to own it unless money comes with it. But if there's jurisdictional transfer, and that facilitates obviously annexation, a whole lot of things, what does that mean in terms of their determination of those standards versus the county? So again, we own the facility. They have jurisdictional transfer, which they could all go do tomorrow if they wanted to within their respective boundaries. What would that do to these standards?
Mm-hmm. So with a jurisdictional transfer, that would actually transfer ownership of the roadway to the other agency. So
not necessarily. You might want to get Alan to do that. But we've had cities who've accepted the jurisdictional transfer, but not the ownership of the highway.
Yeah, I think, and maybe there's multiple terms that, like, the city can annex the roadway.
Well, there you go. That's a better term. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but until they accept a transfer of jurisdiction from the county, it remains a county roadway. And so you raise an interesting point. We've had instances where we've improved a roadway and worked with the city on how to do that. And in some cases, that can become a precondition for the city accepting the jurisdiction of the roadway after it's been improved to a more acceptable standard. And it's very similar to our conversations with ODOT. There are some ODOT facilities that we think make sense to be in county jurisdiction. However, they need lots and lots of improvements done. And so that's been an ongoing discussion about, how could improvements be funded to help facilitate a transfer. And now there's the statewide conversation around 82nd TV Highway and a number of other orphan highways and how to help facilitate jurisdictional transfer by the current owner investing funds in it and then transitioning the ownership to another entity.
I don't want to get in the weeds too much. We've got other things to do, but I've proposed to cities in this area a long time to annex those highways, but just don't take over the jurisdiction. We're using the proper terms now. So that they would have ownership, in essence, in the future, they have a right to deal with whatever they need to deal with. Would that change what these standards would do? And I can name a number of instances down in this neck of the woods where somebody might say, I'll annex the highway as far as annexation. I won't take the ownership. That's still yours. Mm-hmm. What do these standards then do to them? Mm-hmm. Should they decide to do that?
Yeah, I don't think it fundamentally changes that conversation. It's always been a collaborative dialogue, and the city has to proactively accept a transfer of jurisdiction. We can't just pawn our roads off on other entities, and so we are strategic.
They don't want to take jurisdiction. They don't want to own them. They just want to annex them for purposes of planning. That's the issue.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think that just gets back to, we do try to be collaborative and coordinate closely with our city partners as we're developing projects in their jurisdiction, whether we're the owner of the road. And there are cases where we've built road improvements on city streets. Farmington Road in Beaverton is a good example. And so it's actually a city street, but we used MSTIP funds to improve it and bring it up to a more current urban standard. And in that case, we just implemented the city design standards for that project, which were different from the county standards. So we simply implemented the city standards. So we try to be collaborative and coordinate as much as we can and try to come up with projects that are acceptable to everyone. And again, that can be a precondition then potentially to a conversation about a potential transfer of a road from county to city. Let's say if we improve it, it's done to something that is very close to or is the city standard, and the city might agree to accept the jurisdiction as a result of that project.
I think the commissioner's point, part of that is if it's annexed into the city, then outside the curb to curb space, the city is then responsible for the maintenance. And we also, with that maintenance, give a lot of flexibility to what they want that bicycle and pedestrian facility to look like. So it can get a lot bigger depending on what the city would like to see, because they're going to be responsible for maintaining it.
And Commissioner Rogers, my experience with this from working with Beaverton and the county is that the county does have the somewhat the upper hand in this, because if the city's being difficult about their design, then the county doesn't have to build the project. We can just not build the project. So typically cities are flexible and will work with the county on a project inside the city.
And one additional note on city coordination, part of the reason we're including the cycle track in our standard drawings is that it is the Hillsborough standard, and we build a lot of roads in the city of Hillsborough. And so we wanted to make sure that we have that design drawing complementary to what Hillsborough has so that it's easier to move forward with those projects.
It's definitely an improvement. The first cycle track in the county is in the city of Beaverton, and they've improved a lot over time. So the question I have is on one of the diagrams that you have, and it's about the center turn lanes. And let me preface it with, I've learned a lot over the last couple of years about the evolution of the road design standards, and through a lot of different meetings, well, not a lot, but various meetings with Stacy Shetler and other members of the LUT team. So if you could bring up the slide, I don't know the number, that has the cross section with center turn lanes. I just have a specific question to understand it a little bit better.
So I think, yeah, maybe one or two more slides.
There you go. I think that'll do it. Exactly. So I really appreciate how the evolution of lane widths has occurred, and looking at the context. I think that's clearly what you've articulated here, that our community has changed as we have more people living within our various suburban and urban areas. And so the road design and construction standards have evolved to reflect the community that we have today, and that is projected into the future. The one aspect that I haven't seen changed, and I would just like to have the benefit of further understanding, is on the center turn lanes being 13 feet wide. On one hand, going through the different smart growth conference and context design sensitive workshops and whatnot, they talk about how the drivers of the public transit buses, the 18-wheelers for freight, the fire engines, the garbage trucks, the delivery service vehicles, those are professional drivers. Yet our center turn lanes continue to be 13 feet. And on one hand, I think about different county arterials that I've been on, like the 170th between Farmington and TV Highway. And that arterial is through a evolving neighborhood that continues to have a lot of different driveways. So that center turn lane is really needed for that refuge across the multiple lanes. But has there been any recent testing on, does it need to be 13 feet or can it be sized smaller to like 12 feet? And the reason that I'm asking is primarily because with our other hat on as Clean Water Services, we as the region, the Washington County ratepayers are paying for the storm water handling for decades, right? In, time into the future, time memorial into the future for that impervious pavement. So can you just help me understand what the current thinking is on that? That's all.
So I actually think for this slide, for the collector cross section, we were thinking the center turn lane could be 12, and that's what it says in the table. I think we just have a mismatch there in our graphic. We produced a number of these to get ready for the presentation. So I think we have a mistake there in the cross section. We'll fix that. But if we go back one slide to the arterial, I think that one is showing 13. So I think that's reflecting, you can see in the table, we would go down to a 12-foot in the multimodal area, but it would be 13 in the urban. And so I think it's just that trying to match the size of the center turn lane with the speed of the facility. So in the arterial, you want it to be a little bit bigger. On the collector, it can go down a little bit.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Well, I think it's on that, so we have a mistake in our table, or we have a mistake in the cross section. We'll fix that.
Right. And I think in our current road standard, the center turn lane width is 14 feet, regardless of the context. And so, again, I think this is just one more recognition that, we need to look at things with a little bit more critical eye toward how we're allocating that space, like you said, in that pavement, and trying to ensure that we're utilizing that space well. And I think, and Stacy maybe could elaborate, but I think, that additional width in the turn lane, that it is a function of, you do have buses that are moving into the turn lanes, or sometimes large vehicles. You do have, when you're in the turn lane, you've got vehicles passing you by it. You may be stopped there and you've got vehicles passing you by it at speed. And so there's an element of a little bit of what they call shy distance, just a little bit of separation. And people, when they pull into the turn lane, they may pull in at a bit of an angle instead of getting perfectly lined up straight. So that little extra wiggle room is a little bit of a safety feature.
Yeah, but I think there's a balance with stormwater that has to be looked at. So
exactly, and that's what we've been looking at. So, and that's why I think we felt comfortable going from 14 feet to 13. It makes perfect sense, and then down to 12 in certain other contexts where the speeds are going to be slower.
Yeah, and I hear that now. I had not recalled that, so that's really
it's a
helpful.
great question. Yeah, great question.
I think part of that, your question, Chair, is also whether there needs to be one or not.
Mm-hmm.
And for the standard, we have it shown, I think, in larger projects where you can determine where the left turn lanes are needed and not needed. It's easier to skinny things up, but as you're building facilities in an area that may have not developed, you're not quite sure where those left turns are going to be needed, and so it tends to get overbuilt. To put it in perspective, the left turn lanes on TV Highway are 16 feet wide. Granted, the speeds are pretty high. I know in the past you said you like the show and tell, or the show me a place where I can see something in action. And if you go to Cornell Road at Grant Street, and it's the left turn lanes there are 12 feet, and you'll feel a little bit pinched there. And so it's kind of interesting to experience that, especially on a facility that's 35 or a little higher. So again, as we're able to achieve those target speeds, the lane widths we're able to get narrower and narrower. The trucks that are out there, transit vehicles, they're 10 feet, 10 and a half feet mirror to mirror, and so we are starting to pinch them down quite a bit.
And I think we've all experienced how with increasing traffic volumes over these decades, the practical speed limits for more hours of the day, even though if the posted speed limit may be 45, traffic's really moving at 35 or less because of the nature of the volumes. So the experience has evolved, but you're reminding me that these road design and construction standards are evolving to match that as well. So very helpful. Thank you very much. So I don't have any other questions on the material. Back to your questions for today. Let's just check with the board. So board members, are you all comfortable with the proposed updates? Okay. Do you agree with the selected bicycle and pedestrian facility options? And are we in agreement with the area type definitions and respective design elements? Yeah. I think all of that is telling you, team, though it hasn't been said yet, good job.
Yeah, kudos to Aaron and Stacy. They've done a great job doing the road show and really engaging a lot of folks.
Yeah, thank you very much for helping
all.
us all understand the improvements and the evolution over time. Good job.
Thank you.
Great. So that's it for topics before our business meeting convenes at 10 o'clock. Are there any other items that we need to attend to? Okay. Well, seeing none, then we'll see you back on a different Zoom link for our regular business meeting at 10 o'clock. Thank you.